Hi, this is John Finch, in fulfillment of Introduction to Social Work with Dr. Rivers, spring of 2013. My practice area is on international social work. The attractive guy on the bottom right corner is me. So let's get started. What is international social work? There are three areas of international social work. Social work between countries, including those seeking refuge, wars, or humanitarian aid. Social workers in international organizations who operate interested in, assist, or carry out social development, welfare, or planning both in America and abroad. These can include government organizations both here in the U.S. and abroad, or non-government organization, NGOs. This is the private sector, including non-profit, faith-based, and for-profit companies. Finally, social work practice in another country than your own. This is typically what most people picture as social work. The historical development of international social work started a little before World War I. As nations started to bear arms and rise against each other, there was a need to collaborate and rise together as one to fight off emerging superpowers. The need for international diplomacy became prevalent. International social work began to grow even more so after World War II as new nations were emerging and declaring their independence in the 1950s and 60s and sought for help and guidance from those well-established countries. One of the most important pieces in the development of international social work came from the creation of the UN in 1942. Although their purpose was to band together to fight off the Axis powers, and today they are known for their political and military prowess, however they are often more successful with human rights, humanitarian aid, and overall social development and relief for those individuals in need. So let's look at the UN. As you can see, the UN has 5 major departments, if you look at the left, also called principal organs, and amongst those are numerous divisions, sub-departments, and entire organizations altogether with all their own purpose. So it's safe to say there is a bunch going on at the UN. Let's look at those organizations in the UN that directly deal with international social work, or international social workers might find themselves dealing with. First is the UN Refugee Agency. This agency mandates, leads, and coordinates international action to protect refugees and resolve refugee problems worldwide. The World Food Program, during emergencies, WFP seeks to get food where it's needed, saving the lives of victims of war, civil conflict, and natural disasters. Next is the Economic and Social Council. They set international goals on development, such as educational needs, the advancement of the internet to people who don't have it, health or food needs, and basically system integration. They focus on development challenges. Next, a popular one is the UN Children's Fund, the UNICEF. They focus on the multiple facets of problems with children, and we'll talk more about those problems that children face internationally. Also is the UN Development Program. They partner with people of all levels of society to help build nations that can withstand crisis, drive and sustain the kind of growth that improves the quality of life for everyone. Some of these actions include poverty reduction, democratic governance, and energy initiatives. Finally is the World Health Organization, WHO. They direct and coordinate authority for health within the United Nations system. They provide leadership on global health matters, shaping the health research agenda, setting norms and standards, articulating evidence-based policy options, providing technical support to countries, and even monitoring and assessing health trends globally. Now let's look at international social work as it pertains in the U.S. In the U.S. government, we have a few agencies that deal with U.S. social work that people in international social work might find themselves familiar with. First is USAID. As you see on the picture on the bottom right, those rice bags, that's a pretty good example of the type of aid the U.S. Agency for International Development does. Next is the Office of Child Support Enforcement. They work with parents here and abroad to help promote the welfare of the child. Peace Corps provides opportunities for individuals to volunteer in several different areas globally with the purpose of improvement. The Intercountry Adoption Bureau, Consular Affairs, part of the U.S. Department of State, they help with the different legalities when it comes to adopting international children. And then finally is the Office of Refugee Resettlement, and a branch that reaches out to different areas in the world where there are refugees and helping them strive for either resettlement or naturalization in a new country. Also, there are social work organizations that are international. The International Federation of Social Workers, they strive to bring social justice, human rights, and social development through the promotion of social work. And they also provide best practice models that helps and facilitate international cooperation. There's the ISSW. They provide worldwide association of schools of social work. They also provide different educational programs, and it consists of mostly social work educators and organizations. The ICSW consists of social work organizations. They do more advocacy and policy development. And finally is the International Consortium of Social Development. They do more so conceptual frameworks. They also do some intervention strategies geared to influencing local, national, and international systems. Some of the NGOs, they're secular-based and ministry-based. There's just so many out there. They do anywhere between fighting corruption, helping children and women, fighting for their needs, international adoption, providing humanitarian aid. And here's just a few, and there's hundreds of thousands, and there's more added every day. But now that we can see the history and the different parties involved in international social work, it's time to focus on the role of the social worker. There's some diverse but commonality between an international social worker and a typical social worker. Many of the same fields in America, however, internationally there are many more. But there is some commonality. And the 5 areas we're going to look at are empowerment, capacity building, enhancing social integration, income generation, and community development. First is empowerment. The Dictionary of Social Work says empowerment is the theory concerned with how people may gain collective control over their lives so as to achieve their interests as a group, and a method by which social workers seek to embrace the power of people who lack it. Empowerment. The goal of a social worker in an empowerment setting is to make people feel empowered, either give them self-confidence or motivate them, and make them realize that they are part of the community. After they understand that they are important, have the social worker makes them feel part of the community and that they have control over the wider environment, whether it be community, organization, political. But the goal of the social worker is to make the person feel that they can control their destiny. And part of this is to reduce negative forces and increase positive forces. These different obstacles that individuals might face during capacity building could revolve around different types of people and organizations. Individuals, families, communities, government or private sector are all obstacles that might inhibit somebody from fully growing to their capacity. Lack of self-esteem. Some of the goals of somebody building capacity on an individual is to let the person become more self-reliant. They want to get a sense of sustainability and who they are and where they fall at in the role of their community. This requires participation. Sometimes a social worker needs to seek an individual as equality, or they have the basic human rights that everybody deserves. And it also varies depending on the situation of the individual. The individual could face, self-esteem issues. There could be a lack of education and they need to increase learning skills. There also could be community involvement issues and helping them to be involved. And one of the big ones we'll talk about is income generation opportunities. A lot of times these countries and individuals in need of capacity building might lack the basic structure of a job. Now we're looking at enhancing social integration. This is another part of international social work. This can cover a broad range of topics from race to migration status, class status, and even income opportunity. No matter the situation, this is very difficult to avoid conflict just because of the way the world is going and how we are becoming a bigger melting pot, and people often either be cultural or where they were born or where they were born into. They face different conflict between the different levels of class, or might be just because they're born a female and there's different women's rights than males' rights. And some of the strategies to deal with this that social workers put into place is a buoyant economy. It helps to have an economy that provides opportunity for growth. It also provides basic needs for food, shelter, safety, and health. Also, legislative policy is a big deal when it comes to social integration, whether it be anti-discrimination laws, equal opportunity laws, or the likes. And then finally is a social worker might be asked to promote multicultural society by doing events or PSAs that are geared towards enhancing social integration. Another key area in international social workers is income generation. These two pictures on the left show people who are making the most of where they're at, whether it be raising chickens to sell their eggs or their meat, or in the example of the one on top, sewing garments or clothes or mending clothes in order for people to have an income. As you can see, one of the quotes you always hear all the time is, over such and such amount of people live on less than $1 a day. That still holds some validity. Poverty is the number one issue for international social workers, and it's on all faces of people they run into, whether it be children, people who are seeking refuge in another country, or women, elderly. That's the number one issue people face, international social workers face, is poverty. In order to fight poverty, individuals must seek non-traditional resources like the ones to the left. And a lot of this is done through microfinancing and microloans. This is a big step that a lot of larger banks are taking on, are these microloans to help individuals kickstart a small business. Next is community development, the need to cultivate a desire for change. That's key for a social worker in the area they're going to be working. They have to identify those individuals that are marginalized by the community, find out what's marginalizing them, how they can go about changing policies or making people more self-aware of the individuals that are in need. Using the first step of empowerment both for individuals and organizations. We talked about empowerment, capacity building. Both of these are very high in the community development. And part of this, an individual that's a social worker has to take into consideration the cultural and political implications of where they're at and who they're working with. But looking at the different areas of international social workers focus on, there are different clients depending on where they are serving. So let's look at clients served. It's diverse, but I want to group these individuals into several different key areas. First is poverty, conflict, post-conflict, displacement, forced migration, children, medical, natural and human-caused disasters. See, these are the different types of situations the international social worker might find themselves in and the people they're going to help. First is poverty. You're going to run, like I said, it's the number one cause that most people run into in international social work. And this is due usually because of a lack of economic structure, unstable government, lack of opportunity for educational needs, poor education, little to no jobs. Many of these individuals are in survival mode, and they're susceptible to fraud or exploitation. Many of them are victimized, and part of this is brought on by overpopulation and disease. So these are some of the clients that international social workers will serve. They will also serve people in post-conflict and conflict areas. These are people that are at war. This is very dangerous for international social workers. Just on the news the other day, I saw right after the Boston incident and bombing that there was 27 killed in a bomb in Israel. And to realize that there are other countries that are constantly dealing with strife and war, and it's an everyday occurrence. Part of an international social worker dealing with these people, they're going to have to become more politically involved. They're going to work more with communities, to families due to displacement. So they're going to have to know different countries, different cultures and languages, and also just working with different humanitarian aid relief companies, whether it be governmental or an NGO or type. So these are just some of the people in post-conflict and conflict areas that the international social workers work with. Part of that goes to displacement, forced migration, and refugees, which ties into those that are in conflict or post-conflict. A lot of times the social worker is going to be asked to provide or help provide specialized therapeutic services, including trauma counseling, rehabilitation, maybe offering support groups. And the services that they offer under this, it's going to be to a wide group of people, from children to the elderly, women and men alike. Also, the promotion of community development and empowerment. Once again, that key of working together amongst the community and helping people empower to access those resources is very key in working with these type of people. Also, these type of people are going to have to face humanitarian health aid, and there might be language barriers or different customs and understanding. Another area international social workers will work in is with children. As you can see, there's Aladdin from the Disney movie. Aladdin was a street child. He had little to no connection with his family or friends. He was basically living in survival mode on the street. And so he would do things that typically are unacceptable, but was necessary in order to survive. Also, children, the type of children people in social work and internationally social workers will deal with is international adoptions, child trafficking, prostitution, child labor, and AIDS orphans. Another type of person that people we're working with in this field is those facing medical, pandemics, human and natural disasters. This can include the HIV/AIDS epidemic that's going on, a lot of mental health problems, especially with many other countries lacking in the mental health department. It could be the survival of indigenous people and cultures that are almost wiped out due to the growth of larger cities and people moving into their territory. It could be dealing with racism or pandemics such as SARS, bird flu, H1N1. There could be human disasters. We think of not only a human and a natural disaster that happened in Japan a few years ago, but after the tsunami came and wiped so many people away, there was the toxic emissions from the nuclear power plant, chemical spills. All this can lead to water contamination. So there's just a lot of different areas that the international social worker will come against, and working with so many different types of people and then different organizations when it comes to natural disasters. Finally, let's look at the different methods of intervention that an international social worker will take in. For poverty, it could be microeconomic development, educational system development, capacity building and affirmative action. Under conflict and post-conflict, some of the methods of intervention will be reintegration, rebuilding, rehabilitation, counseling, and psychosocial analysis. A lot of times people are gone through a very trying time and need to be debriefed and need to be compressed down. And that it's a lot around counseling. Also, there's displacement of forced migration. We hit on some of these already. The need for trauma counseling, rehabilitation, understanding and working with humanitarian health aid. For children, there's going to be different levels social workers have to act on. There's going to be many barriers, whether it be finding shelter, food, placement. The problem people run into with caring for children in a social work setting is that they don't really bring in income. And so how do you help an individual when there's no means or funds available to do so? So a lot of times they do have to partner with NGOs. A lot of collaboration when working with any of these fields, but especially with children. Medical and pandemics, getting the word out, spreading the word, and counseling, how to provide relief and aid, and protecting training. So, for example, HIV and AIDS, a lot of that's a behavioral issue more than, he's born with. It's a lot of times an individual has to be trained on how to protect themselves. Human and natural disaster, this is a multi-dimension of well-being and physical and psychological well-being that a social worker will have to intervene and work in counseling. And the goal is to provide individuals to be less vulnerable and increase resilience, usually after a human and natural disaster. I wanted to speak specifically on international adoption. One of the people I was able to interview is Dean Hell. He's with Holt International, and he is the director of programs for India and Mongolia. And he just wanted to share, I was able to get some information about how Holt International works, what the goal is, and some of his work he has done in India and Mongolia. First, he says the one thing is permanency. The goal of Holt and a lot of other international adoption agencies is to keep the child with the family member, if at all possible, whether it be trying to solve income needs or finding somebody who might be able to take care of them in an institution setting, whatever that might be. Children have a strong need for intimacy. They can't get that from, an institution per se. So there's just special needs that children have that isn't offered but by another human. Once again, he said, a lot of individuals that can't watch for their children are institutionalized. And he says, no matter what field of area of international social work, it requires a diversified skill set. I thought that was pretty awesome. He just went on and on about how when you're working in this field, it requires know about societies and social work. It knows about psychology and behavioral issues, political structures, economical structure, the different cultural shock going there and then coming back. Another individual I was able to interview was Dr. Neil Abel. He is a doctorate at Florida State University. He's also the director of international programs, and he's part of the social work group as well. Recently, last year he went with a group down to the Caribbean to provide HIV and AIDS training. He partnered with the Florida Association for Volunteer Action in the Caribbean and the Americas. Just a little bit of history about the Caribbean. It's the second highest concentration of people affected with HIV/AIDS. Although there's not as many people as the Sub-Saharan Africa, which is number one, just the prevalence rate is second in the world. Some of the problems he said he runs into that an international social worker in this field will run into is the religious beliefs, moral teachings is so strong to their cultural that many times somebody who is a sinner or has HIV/AIDS or has been caught in sin is stigmatized from the rest of the group in the community, and they are often put off and actually have to go underground sometimes. And people are willing to compromise their beliefs for food and shelter that they might not otherwise have to. The good thing is he said the future is bright. He said the pieces are in place. There are people that are strong leaders there who see the long-term view in mind, and he thinks that this will slowly begin to diminish in the next 10 to 15 years as people become more aware of HIV/AIDS and strides are made to save these people. So what are some of the current issues of international social works? The diversified educational background and programming for those interested in international social work. There's so many different programs out there. There's different countries. There's no set programming. Another issue is increase in NGOs. This is good and bad. Good, there's a lot of good ones out there that are making strides. However, there's a lot of people that are corrupt and or companies have bad business models and are not well monitored. So there's some good and there's some bad when it comes into the increase of NGOs. There's continued segregation between the haves and the have-nots. The wealthy and those that are in need or is continuing to grow. And then finally is local policy versus international standards. The local cultural policy of a country might be that which allows women to be subordinate to men, and this can be negative or could be looked down upon when compared to what an international standard is or what we're used to here in America. The future does look bright. Standardization of educational requirements, that's becoming more and more with the different international groups working together. The recognition of this position in more countries is key for the increase of international social work. And there's also better coordination and collaboration between NGOs and governmental agencies. We're reaching a new era of philanthropy. Even though those people that have more money, they're also giving more money, and more people are recognizing the need internationally and just not locally. I believe that there will be some eradication of some health issues, which is the current medicine and the way vaccinations are going, that there will eventually be the stopping out of some diseases. Also, people are more connected through the internet and through cell phones, and the idea of people being more connected is key into getting relief faster and people understanding each other better. And finally, it's innovative ways of thinking. There's with the internet and with the people in place, there's just so much room for people to understand and the issues and come up with clever ways in solving these issues. So let's kind of look as a review of what we looked at. What is international social work? It's social work in another country than your own, social work in an organization that affects another country, or social work between countries. What does an international social work do? Social workers look to empower, build capacity to enhance social integration, income generation, and community develop. Who do they help? They help various individuals, from children, adults, elderly, all in various needs, from those in war-torn countries to those facing natural disasters, those that are stuck in poverty, or even lack the basic human rights. How do they go about helping? They go about doing this by collaboration, seeking first the individual, and by grasping social standards, laws, policies, and cultural impacts. What is currently going on? There is a rise of those that are wealthy and those without wealth, but there's also an increase of philanthropy. A constant balance in act what is right and laws of governance is always going on. The future. What does the future look like? The future sees a further recognition of this field area of social work and further collaboration between organizations. Overall, international social work is a diversified and ever-growing field that requires knowledge of social sciences, political and cultural backgrounds, historical roots, and above all, compassion for people. Just want to thank you all so much for allowing me to do the international social work study. I encourage everybody, this is a very diversified field and there's a lot of knowledge out there, and I have a wealth of information is online, as well as talking to some of these organizations and some of the good work that they do. And that concludes my presentation. I wish everybody would have a good rest of the semester, and God bless.